Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 107. We're going to talk about Wilderness from 1996. I rented this from Scarecrow Video, so the version I saw was cut down from the television miniseries. I'll talk more about that later. I had not seen this before. We begin with the prominent crew and cast. You can also find links to a more complete credit list in the show notes. The film was directed by Ben Bolt, written by Andrew Davies and Bernadette Davis, based on the novel by Dennis Danvers. A lot of D's. Ben Bolt is primarily a television director known for his work on various popular British TV series and films. He became active in the industry in the 80s, directing episodes for several well-known British television series, including Downton Abbey, Shameless, Wire in the Blood, Inspector Morse, Silent Witness, and Ashes to Ashes. Bolt has also directed some films. Andrew Davies began his professional life as an English literature teacher, writing in his spare time and focusing on novels and stage plays. Davies transitioned to screenwriting in the 60s, with his first major success coming from a very peculiar practice. His literary adaptations brought him wide acclaim. Notable works include adaptations of Pride and Prejudice in 1995, Bleak House in 2005, War and Peace in 2016, and Les Miserables in 2018. Davies also penned original screenplays, including the original House of Cards in 1990, and co-wrote the screenplay for Bridget Jones' Diary in 2001. Davies has received multiple BAFTA and Emmy Awards, and in 1999, he was honored with the Writers Guild of Great Britain's Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2002, he was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire for his services to literature. Andrew Davies is considered one of his generation's most successful British screenwriters. His work has entertained millions and also brought classic literature to new audiences. Bernadette Davis is a television writer and producer known for her contributions to the comedy and drama series in the United Kingdom. Dennis Danvers has published 10 novels. He taught fiction writing and science fiction and fantasy literature at Virginia Commonwealth University for over 30 years. The cast includes Owen Teale as Dan Summers, Gemma Jones as Jane Garth, Michael Kitchen as Luther Adams, Catherine Russell as Deborah, Amanda Ooms as Alice White, and Catherine Holman as young Alice. Now this is a pretty stacked cast. Owen Teale is a Welsh actor in theater, television, and film. In theater, Teale received a Tony Award in 1997 for his performance in A Doll's House on Broadway. On television, Teale is perhaps best known for his role as Sir Alistair Thorne in HBO's Game of Thrones from 2011 to 2016. But he has also appeared in other such popular series as Line of Duty, A Discovery of Witches and Spooks. My wife would insist I mention he's appeared on Midsummer Murders. His film credits include The Last Legion in 2007 and Tolkien in 2019. Gemma Jones trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art before making her mark on both stage and screen. Jones is best known to international audiences for her film work, notably as Bridget's mother in the Bridget Jones film series and as Madame Pomfrey in the Harry Potter franchise. Her television career includes memorable roles in series like The Duchess of Duke Street in 1976 and 1977. Oh, and she's appeared in Midsummer Murders as well. Michael Kitchen is a familiar face in British television, film, and theater. Kitchen is best known for his leading role as Detective Chief Superintendent Christopher Foyle in the long-running TV series Foyle's War, running from 2002 to 2015. His television career also includes notable appearances in series such as Out of Africa in 1985 and To Play the King in 1993. In film, Kitchen demonstrated his versatility with roles in major productions like Bill Tanner in Goldeneye in 1995 and The World Is Not Enough in 1999. He has also appeared in critically acclaimed films such as My Week with Marilyn in 2011. Catherine Russell is best known for her long-running role as Serena Campbell in the popular BBC medical drama Holby City, which she played from 2012 to 2021. She has appeared in Midsummer Murders. Amanda Ooms has worked extensively in both Swedish and international productions, demonstrating an ability to perform in multiple languages. Ooms has appeared in films as well as popular Swedish television series. Her stage work includes performances with the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm. In addition to acting, she has ventured into writing, publishing a pair of novels. Catherine Holman had a fairly brief career as a child actress, mostly in the 90s. There are things to praise in this movie, and I wouldn't go so far as to warn you not to waste your time like I do with some other movies, but I just can't quite bring myself to recommend it. It wrestles with some interesting themes, and the performances are generally good. It's just so long and weirdly boring for a movie that has so much nudity in it. We know Alice actually turns into a wolf, so Even though we intellectually understand why Dan and Dr. Adams struggle to accept her lycanthropy, it just feels frustrating and unnecessarily drawn out. Additionally, the film keeps telling us that Alice feels alone, but it never shows us why. I get the feeling the book might do this better. The miniseries format the story was originally adapted into probably does spend more time on this important element. Ultimately, very little actually happens aside from conversations. So speaking of adaptations, let's talk about one potential reason why I didn't love this movie. Wilderness was a novel written by Dennis Danvers and published in 1991. The TV adaptation came 5 years later, airing as a miniseries with a 174-minute runtime. Unfortunately, the only version I could find was a movie edited down from the series, which only runs about 100 minutes, which means there was over an hour of material missing. So bear in mind that this is a discussion of the edited movie rather than the series. It's immediately apparent from watching Wilderness that it's based on a novel. Whole sections of the story are Alice and Dr. Adams engaging in therapy sessions, talking about what she's feeling. The fact that there's an hour missing explains why the pacing is so frustrating. So let's move on to the synopsis. Young librarian Alice ditches work early to pick up a random man at a fancy hotel. Later, she confesses to her therapist, Dr. Luther Adams, that she only sleeps with each man once. She also tells him that she turns into a moon once a month, on the full moon. He takes it in stride, but doesn't believe her. Her hearing is shockingly good. It turns out this is the first sign of her pending transformation. She buys an amazingly large quantity of steak. She prepares a water bowl, a pile of steak, and a dirty mattress in a filthy basement. She lays there and shivers in the nude under the full moon. The next day, academic Dan Summers asks her out, and she accepts. She continues working with Dr. Adams about her lupine condition. It's been happening since she was 13 when her period first began. She wants a long-term relationship, kids, the whole package, but she doesn't think she can be honest with a partner until she is fully in control of the wolf. She goes out on a date with Dan, and their chemistry spooks Alice. She has a genuinely creepy nightmare of scientists, including Dan, vivisecting her to find the wolf inside. Alice discusses her first sexual experience with a boy a few years older than her that she had a crush on with Dr. Adams. She got cold feet, but he didn't respect her boundaries. We see her transform and kill the young man. Dr. Adams tries to contextualize all of this through the lens of psychiatry. Alice insists that she's telling the factual truth. He confirms that a young man did die, and a young Alice confessed to the murder. Alice runs into Dan at a posh academic affair. The two slip off to hook up in the library. The sexual encounter delays her lycanthropic metamorphosis, but does not prevent it. She has to slip away. Alice later learns she killed a human while in wolf form from a radio news report and visits the crime scene in human form. Dan worried about her when he woke up alone, and he returns her stuff. Dan wants to pursue a relationship, but she's conflicted. She attends an academic lecture on wolves. Professor Jane Garth discusses the tragedy of the lone wolf. Wolves need packs. Garth also lets Alice know the dead person was stabbed. The wolf just consumed part of the dead body. Dr. Adams uses hypnotism to try to get to the root of Alice's psychological condition. Even hypnotized, she can't tell him what it feels like to be the wolf. She has no words for it. She transforms for a second, and Adams sees it, but he won't admit the evidence of his own eyes. He's convinced Alice's case will make him famous in the psychiatric community. Alice sees Dan at lunch with another woman. She doesn't take it well and accuses him of cheating. When he tries to calm her, she growls at him. Dan explains that it was just his ex-wife, Deborah. Alice tells Dan if he ever lies to her, she will kill him. Run, Dan, run. Dr. Adams seems jealous of Dan and denigrates him. Alice believes that if the wolf can be summoned by hypnotism, it can also be controlled by hypnotism. Adams teaches her self-hypnotism, and the initial results are promising, but he isn't entirely happy with that. His obsession with Alice impacts his other relationships. Oh, good. Dan's ex-wife tells him to avoid women who threaten to kill you, which you should do. Alex finally tells Dan about her lycanthropy. He obviously has trouble believing her. She tells him he doesn't have to be afraid of her, which, yes, he does. Wolf or not, she is troubled. She tries to prove it to him, but she can't summon the wolf. Dan wants to get Alice help. She fears that she can't control the wolf and asks Dan to leave. She's afraid that she will be alone forever. Dr. Adams' writings show how conceited and arrogant he is. Adams encourages Dan to get away, saying that Alice's metaphorical wolf is a manifestation of her fear and hatred of men. Adams' wife confesses that she is sleeping with his best friend, but Adams doesn't seem to care. He's getting more and more megalomaniac. He thinks this case with Alice will dominate psychoanalytic thinking for a century. Adams plans on having therapeutic sex with Alice. Ugh. Garth won't rule out the existence of werewolves. She is convinced that Alice has a pet wolf and offers to take it to a nature retreat in Scotland where it can be happy. Dan reconnects with Deborah, who is a nice, well-adjusted woman. Alice finds Deborah at Dan's apartment and the two women clash. Alice feels threatened. She transforms into the wolf and scares the living daylights out of Deborah. Dan sees a wolf leave his apartment. Alice is finally convinced that she cannot be happy among the humans. She calls Garth and packs to leave. Dr. Adams comes to her apartment where he violates every psychiatric ethical guideline. Alice turns into a wolf and runs away. She should have killed the bastard. Adam goes off the deep end. Alice moves to a nature reserve in Scotland. Garth believes and accepts Alice finally. Alice strips naked and transforms into a wolf. She decides to become a wolf permanently. Dr. Adams ends up in a mental hospital. Dan fails to convince Alice to return to humanity. It turns out all of this is a bedtime story Dan is telling his daughters, raising the possibility that it's all a parable. So here we find what I consider to be one of the first decent CGI morph transformations. I mean, it's not great, but the process is clearly improving. Part of it is that Alice doesn't turn into a monster. She turns into a wolf, indistinguishable from any normal wolf, which means that there's no werewolf makeup. There's just a blend from human to animal. The other part is she gets into a position before the change. She'll kneel on all fours or lie on the floor and then shift to the forms that already match pretty well. Unlike most werewolf stories, Alice's transformations are not portrayed as a curse, infection, or genetic heritage, but rather as an inherent part of her unique nature. For some unexplained reason, she was born this way. There is no indication her parents similarly transform. The movie hints her ability is incredibly rare, though that isn't definitive. There is zero evidence for any supernatural strengths or weaknesses. She's either a human or she's a wolf. Now, the first theme I want to explore is love and acceptance. The relationship between Alice and Dan forms the heart of the story, exemplifying unconditional love. Dan's unwavering acceptance of Alice, despite her claims of an inner wolf nature, drives the narrative. His love becomes the catalyst for both characters' growth. Now, Dan's ability to embrace Alice, even without fully believing her claims, showcases the depth of true acceptance. However, the film suggests that love and acceptance, while powerful, may not always be sufficient. Alice's journey of self-discovery leads her to ultimately choose a place in the natural world over human civilization, despite Dan's love for her. This decision raises questions about the limits of acceptance within societal constraints. Now, in contrast to Dan's accepting nature, Dr. Luther Adams represents the dangers of rejection and exploitation. Driven by his own ambition and condescension, Adams views Alice as a subject to study and exploit, rather than a person to understand. His inability to accept Alice's true nature leads to a self-destructive obsession, highlighting the negative consequences of forcing others to conform to our expectations. Alice's wolf nature serves as a metaphor for those who find themselves at odds with societal norms. The film posits that true fulfillment comes from embracing one's unique traits and finding or creating a community that accepts them rather than conforming to society's expectations. However, Wilderness acknowledges the costs of this path, as Alice must leave behind aspects of human society that she values, notably the library and the man she loves. Ultimately, Wilderness delivers a powerful message about the importance and limitations of love and acceptance. It challenges viewers to consider their capacity for understanding those who are different, promoting a more inclusive and compassionate worldview. The film suggests that while being truly seen and accepted is crucial for personal growth, individuals must also find environments where they can fully express their true selves, even if that means making difficult choices. And this is a nice transition to the next theme that I want to discuss, how Wilderness explores the tension between human nature and animal instinct, using Alice's dual identity as both woman and wolf to delve into questions about freedom and societal constraints. At its core, the film grapples with the age-old question: what defines a human? Where do we draw the line between our civilized selves and our primal instincts? Alice's struggle with her inner wolf serves as a metaphor for internal conflicts that many face in reconciling societal roles with innermost desires. Her human side is bound by behavioral norms and expectations, while her wolf nature represents freedom and a connection to the natural world. This dichotomy raises a compelling question. Are our true selves defined by our rational, socialized human aspects, or by our more instinctual animalistic urges. The film's decision to tie Alice's first transformation to her menstrual cycle adds complexity to this theme. On one level, it suggests a connection between her wolf nature and female sexuality, potentially implying that female sexuality is something wild, uncontrollable, and even dangerous. However, the presence of other women who are sexual and not part-time wolves complicates this interpretation, hinting at a broader explanation of female power and identity beyond a simple metaphor. Dr. Adams' flawed diagnosis of Alice's wolf delusion as a manifestation of fear and hatred of men further indicates the relationship between Alice's wolf nature and her menstrual cycle is more nuanced and complex than it initially appears. To add to this argument, the fact that her sexual encounters with Dan hold the wolf at bay, even if only temporarily, is evidence that the metamorphosis does relate to Alice's sexuality, but that it is not just her gendered desire for sex. The contrast between Alice's craving for open spaces during her transformations and the confines of human society underscore the film's exploration of freedom versus containment. The wilderness setting becomes a metaphor for liberation, representing a space where Alice can fully embrace her nature without the judgments and restrictions imposed by civilization. And this juxtaposition invites viewers to consider how society might stifle our authentic selves and the potential cost of conforming to those societal expectations. However, it's also true that the wolf pack has its own expectations and social requirements, as spelled out by Professor Garth. Alice ultimately faces a choice between two worlds, each with its own set of rules and constraints. There is no truly free option. Alice must choose which society enables her to be most herself. The wolves seem to accept the wolf, who is part woman, better than humanity accepts the woman, who is part wolf, adding another layer to the film's exploration of acceptance and belonging. The film's casual displays of nudity are thematically resonant with these ideas of freedom and natural expression. While somewhat unusual for American television, such depictions are more common in British productions. By presenting nudity in a mostly non-sexualized, matter-of-fact manner, Wilderness reinforces the idea of returning to a more natural state. This approach to nudity aligns with the film's broader themes of shedding social constraints and embracing one's true nature. Additionally, the nudity emphasizes Alice's vulnerability and emotional exposure. Ultimately, Wilderness presents an interesting perspective on the human condition, suggesting our nature is not defined by our capacity for reason and civilization, but also by our primal instincts and connection to the natural world. The film posits that true self-realization requires balancing between these aspects of our being, or in some difficult cases, choosing to fully embrace one side over the other. Through Alice's journey, viewers consider their internal struggles between societal expectations and personal desires and reflect on what it truly means to be a human in a world that sometimes seems at odds with our innermost desires. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing Liumi from 1991. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.